Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Terry Melvin, and I'm the Vice President of NCAP. Today, we have with us Jonathan Bretz. He's the President of RSQM Associates. He has over 35 years medical device experience, including regulatory affairs compliance, submission experience. He also has regulatory affairs. Oh, I already said that. Submission experience, regulatory strategies, UDI, obviously, which is the title of the presentation we have today, product development, marketing, sales, operations, and supply chain management. Well, it's a pleasure to have you with us today, Jonathan, and it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Terry. Welcome to today's webinar, and I hope you enjoy it. There are many different reasons why FDA enacted this new regulation. Most center on post-market surveillance. Specifically, it is looking to improve adverse event reporting and aggregation thereof to identify trends, have more thorough and complete recalls, add device usage to disease-specific registries, include device usage into electronic health records and large population-based data sets, i.e. data claims. There is a global perspective to this new regulation as well. In addition to specific device usage as part of the user's electronic health record, UDI is a system to track medical devices throughout their life cycle to help reduce medical errors and improve patient safety. It will help facilitate more accurate reporting, reviewing, analyzing adverse event reports so problem devices can be pinpointed and corrected faster. It will provide a foundation for a global, secure distribution chain, helping to address counterfeiting and diversion and prepare for medical emergencies and disasters. It implements a standardized identifier, allowing manufacturers, distributors, healthcare facilities to more effectively manage medical device recalls. My own experience working at a manufacturer distributor shows the problems of not using a UDI throughout the entire supply chain. It was our practice to assign our own proprietary item numbers to the products we sold. Neither did we capture lot or serial numbers. While it seemingly obscured the manufacturer's information so customers would have our item numbers, it made recalls difficult and time-consuming. We were never quite sure if we notified all the customers who needed to be notified. In retrospect, I'm not sure we fooled anyone. The new regulation is designed to support public health initiatives through strengthening analysis of devices on the market, providing a standard and clear way to record device use in electronic health records, clinical information systems, claim data sources, and registries. Creating a robust post-market surveillance system leveraged to support pre-market approval or clearance of new devices and new uses of currently marketed devices. Reducing medical errors by empowering healthcare professionals and others to more quickly and accurately identify a device and obtain essential information concerning the attributes of the device, and lead to the development of a medical device identification system that is recognized around the world. EU and other regulatory agencies are drafting their versions of a UDI regulation. Some of the benefits of a global UDI system include use of a single UDI worldwide, promote worldwide tracking and tracing, help stop counterfeiting and diversion of medical devices. The ultimate goal is to have one UDI harmonized system worldwide. Question is, will this happen? There are several key definitions you should be aware of that are in the final rule. Automatic identification and data caption, or ADIC, is a fancy way of saying barcode. The most notable definition here is the date format, year, month, day. The proposed rule had month, day, year. If you use the date on a device or package, it must be in the final rule format. This requirement applies to all medical devices when a date is used on its label. FDA has accredited 3 agencies, as FDA early on decided they did not want to be in the business of issuing company IDs. They have left this to the industry to fill this role. The definition section of the final rule, section 801.3, does not define manufacturer. Instead, it defines the labeler, which may be the manufacturer or it may not be. FDA is looking for one entity to take responsibility for the product. This includes the label. If the product is private labeled, who takes responsibility for the labeling? The actual manufacturer or the brand name holder needs to be agreed to by both parties. It really is a business decision as to who fills this role. There are 2 basic premises of the UDI rule. However, there is no hard and fast rule that states there can only be one label. If you already have labels designed for your devices that have some of the required information, labeler name and address, date, serial number, and the like, you don't have to change them. Simply add another label with the UDI information in human readable and ADIC technology format. As you can see, the UDI is made up of several ingredients. Starting with the item code, add the labeler identification code, and you have the device identifier. Mix in the production identifier, and you have a UDI, which looks like a traditional UPC barcode on steroids. There are several details that need to be attended to. If your company doesn't already have a labeler ID, it needs to obtain one. GS1 US Healthcare and Health Industry Business Communication Council, or HIBCC, are for medical devices. International Council for Commonality in Blood Bank Automation, or ICC-BBA, is for medical devices of human origin that are regulated as medical devices. When incorporating the UDI on a device label, it needs to be in human readable and ADIC technology format. The regulation does not specify a specific ADIC technology as it is technology neutral. There is still some confusion relating to direct marking. UDI direct marking is required on devices that will be used more than one time. The confusion has to do with reprocessing. What does it mean? Clean, clean plus disinfected, or clean plus sterilized. FDA is to shortly define this term, but use these definitions for now. I contacted FDA and I'm still waiting for an answer to this question. For standalone software that is sold packaged versus downloaded, this rule requires the package have a UDI label as well. The UDI used on the package may be the same identifier used for the non-packaged version. For one-in-one devices, that is one device per package, the UDI on the package is adequate. FDA is allowed for several exceptions. GMP exempt Class 1 devices are exempt from this rule. There is a list available on the FDA UDI website of 527 product codes that fall under this exemption. Should you have any of these devices, you could always voluntarily use UDIs. There is nothing to stop you. In fact, it may make good business sense. I'll explain why a bit later. UDI does not need to be on the individual single-use device. Instead, it needs to be on the next higher package. For example, exam gloves. The UDI goes on the box, not on each glove. This rule requires that the package have a single version or model, is distributed together in a single device package, is intended to be stored in that device packaging, and is not intended for individual sale. It also does not apply to implanted devices which require a UDI. In addition, over-the-counter Class 1 devices labeled with a UPC can keep the UPC. These devices will still need to be submitted to the Global UDI Database. The final rule redefined the meaning of UPC in relation to over-the-counter devices. It now meets the requirement of a device identifier. All combination products must have a UDI unless, of course, they have a national drug code. If they do, then the constituent parts must have their own UDI, unless, another exception, the combination device is a single entity, parts that are physically, chemically, or otherwise combined. Direct marking exceptions must be noted in the device history file as to the reason why the device cannot be direct marked. There are more exceptions that are outlined in the final regulation. These are detailed in section 801.30 of the rule. FDA has provided a process for requesting an exception or an alternative to the regulations through subpart B, section 801.55. FDA has set the bar high in order to be granted either an exception or an alternative. Exceptions must justify why requirements are not technologically feasible. Alternatives must show how your plan will provide more accurate, precise, or rapid device identification and that it ensures safety or effectiveness. Requests must be in writing, and again, direct marking exceptions, as previously noted, do not need to be formally requested. A new UDI is required when there is a change to a version or a model. If you are calling a device a new version or model and the users think the same, then it is a new device and requires a new DI and label changes. If the number of units in a package changes, for instance, going from 5 to 10, then a new device identifier is required. This aspect has often confused people as they think it has to do with the package design. Changes in UDI have no impact on any pre-market notifications, either 510Ks or PMAs already in process. Standalone software, depending on what changes, may also need a new DI. I recommend that you read the IMDRF UDI guideline published in December 2013 that discusses minor versus major software changes. Minor changes include bug fixes, usability enhancements, security patches, and the like. Major changes include significant changes affecting original performance and effectiveness, safety, or intended use. Section 830.60, relabeling of a device that is required to bear a UDI, requires a new UDI be assigned and a record be kept showing the relationship between the two UDIs. FDA has this fictitious example of a UDI label on the UDI website. As you can see, the label contains information about the product, its name, expiration date, reference, and lot numbers, manufacturer information, UDI barcode, and other details. The following examples show labels using formats from the 3 issuing agencies. Here's an example of a GS1 label format. In this illustration, the UDI is split into 2, one part for the device identifier, the other production identifier. In this instance, the barcode format is GS1 128. Note that the GUDID information contained on the label. We previously discussed the change in date format in the final rule. This applies to the human readable date only. It does not apply to the barcode date. In this example, the human readable date and the IDIC date shown using the same format. This will need to change to be compliant. GS1 has 17 in parentheses as a separator to indicate the following data is a date in their barcodes. The HIBCC, or Health Industry Business Communication Council label format, also shows the device identifier and production identifier separated from each other. HIBCC uses HIBCC-UPN data structure based on the HIBCC Supplier Labeling Standard 2.4 to generate barcodes. Again, note the several GUDID elements. Note in this example, the manufacturing date is missing the day and will need to be changed to be compliant. Third accredited issuing agency, International Council for Commonality in Blood Bank Automation, ICC-BBA, uses the ISBT 128 standard for its UDI labels. The important thing about this UDI format is that it contains donation identification numbers. The ISBT 128 label will be primarily used for tracking tissue products that are regulated as devices. You can see the structure of the ISBT 128. The production identifier has a donation identification number used as the lot number and a division number used as the serial number. Meeting the compliance timeline for your class of devices is critical. Dates on the compliance date column indicate when a UDI must be on labels and/or packaging, as well as when data for these devices must be submitted to the Global UDI Database. Each of the final rules germane sections are noted for your reference. To determine if you have products with a September 2015 compliance date, check your device's product codes against the FDASIA, the FDA Safety and Innovation Act, amended Section 519F of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, September 2013, list on the UDI website. For any labelers of Class 3 or Public Health Service Act licensed devices, you should be well on your way to being compliant. And you might want to start panicking. Fortunately, you do have some breathing room. For any Class 3 labelers who haven't started, I would strongly suggest you file for the 1-year extension. You have 3 years past the compliance date to sell on-hand inventory without the required label, provided you can demonstrate the devices were labeled prior to the compliance date, using the manufacturing date and the like. The FDA considers inventory on consignment to fall under this rule. So you need to track this inventory as well as make sure the inventory is used prior to this 3-year extension. Now that you've created UDIs for your devices, what is the next step? Global UDI Database, pronounced GUDID, is a repository for all DI and labeler information. In order to submit this information, labelers need to request an account through the FDA GUDID website. Labeler organization may have more than one GUDID account. A DUNS number identifies each of these accounts. There are 3 levels: an organization, which may also be a labeler, and third party, which is an entity authorized to submit GUDID information on behalf of labelers. Each GUDID account must have 1 regulatory contact, 1 coordinator, which manages the labeler data entry users, 1 labeler data entry user, and for day-to-day data entry, and 1 labeler DUNS number. A labeler's DUNS number must match the name and address on the device label. Production identifiers are not entered into the database, just production identifier flags to indicate which production identifiers are on the label. There are 2 standard-based methods to submit data: structured input via a web interface, or Health Level 7 Structured Product Labeling, or HL7 SPL process. The HL7 SPL process is an XML format and uses the FDA Electronic Submission Gateway as the pathway to upload data into the GUDID. There were changes from the proposed rule relating to the GUDID. In the proposed rule, FDA did not want to use the GMDN preferred term codes unless they were free. Labelers can now obtain GMDN codes during the submission process. You need to be careful here, as the GMDN agency is continually adding and updating these codes. You need to make the decision if you are going to subscribe to GMDN based on your company's needs. Another change deals with MRI compatibility. If you make a claim your device and have the test results to prove your claim has MRI compatibility, this information is now required as part of the submission to GUDID. This slide shows the overall submission process. FDA has also published an implementation guide on the UDI website, which you should definitely add to your must-read list. Both submission methods are one device identifier record at a time. There is no batch option available. The web-based tool will work well for up to 200 total records, and any more than that becomes overwhelming, and you will need to use the HL7 SPL process. You are also able to use third parties to submit data. GS1 GDSN Global Data Synchronization Network is one example. There are others as well. Or you could build your own submission tool. There are 3 states of entry. Draft DI, only available via web interface, and FDA will hold that information for 180 days before it's scrubbed. Unpublished, this means the information has passed all the business rules and is ready to be published. And published. Once it's published, it will be searchable publicly through the GUDID database. However, currently the GUDID search and retrieval options are not operational, as the FDA is waiting for enough information to be loaded. Appendix B of the draft guidance lists all the data fields you are required to supply with each device. There are 60+ data attributes that need to be provided. Some of the fields are automatically filled in by the GUDID system based on information that is entered. For instance, the labeler name and address are pulled from the DUNS database based on the DUNS number entered. An entry can have more than one device identifier. This is usually the case if you have used different issuing agencies. And this is really based on the need of your customers, as they may have, for instance, a need to use GS1 system or the HIBCC system. Attributes on label package and the values submitted should match. The GUDID also has controlled vocabulary and built-in business rules that will continually check what is inputted. Controlled vocabulary are DUNS number, GMDN code, and FDA product codes. Examples of business rules are: all required data elements must be provided, validating specific elements such as the FDA listing number, etc. Data constraints on specified elements, published date must always be greater than or equal to today, and others. Also, the device identifier can never be reused, even if it's discontinued. It will remain in GUDID, but marked as not in commercial distribution. These are the main points of the UDI regulation. This gives you a snapshot of all the major aspects of the final UDI rule. from label requirements through data submission to post-market surveillance, reporting, and tracking. This really is a publish or perish regulation. Top management must be an active participant in the implementation process. I found out the hard way, not having the top leaders backing my efforts to implement GS1 Global Trade Identification Number, or GTIN, equivalent to the device identifier, was a significant impediment to success. Your implementation team should establish a corporate UDI policy and implementation strategy, getting buy-in from top management. Identify a UDI champion to be the go-to person for all things UDI. Develop a master data management plan. If you have not already subscribed to an issuing agencies and implemented a unique identifier process such as GTIN, you most likely will need to make changes to your computer programs, item master, sales order processing, purchase order processing, EDI programs, inventory, receiving, on hand, to name a few. These changes are needed to be able to use UDI information in communications with your customers and suppliers. These changes will impact almost every department in your organization. I found the changes needed in our business software to be the most time-consuming and costly aspect of implementing GTINs. Simply having a static field to store the UDI will not meet the needs of your customers or suppliers. Determine how you will upload data to GUDID. Web interface, HL7 SPL process, do this yourself, or outsource to a third party. Determine what changes are needed to your budgeting process for implementation and ongoing maintenance. What changes do you need to make to your existing standard operating procedures? FDA expects you to make any changes needed to your SOPs in order to be compliant. They also expect you to treat this as any other aspect of the quality system regulation. Section 801 labeling, subpart B, is a completely new section. Section 801.20 specifically authorizes or requires the use of UDI on labels. Also note the changes that need to be made to your medical device reporting and quality system SOPs. Your selection of accredited issuing agency should also be documented under Section 82050, Purchasing Controls. What are the cost impacts to your company? This new regulation is not without its costs, some of them significant, especially to small medical device labelers. Eastern Research Group estimates it will cost the industry between $600 million and $700 million over a 10-year period. Most costs will be for infrastructure. There are also ongoing costs, from paying initial and annual fees to the issuing agencies and or the GMDN agency to ongoing maintenance of the system. This includes updating your software systems, manufacturing systems, and the like, as well as updating the GUDID system. You will need to have additional resources in most cases to manage these additional requirements. How do you plan for, implement, and follow through to meet the requirements of this new regulation? Analysis, strategizing, and planning are essential. Group your products by class, manufacturing location, packaging requirements, and any other criteria as needed. Perform a gap analysis. What information and systems is or are needed? What internal strengths exist? Determine early on what additional resources are needed, either additional full-time employees or using consultants. In addition to the items on this slide, you will need to determine if 21 CFR Part 11, which pertains to electronic records, revalidation will be required. This is particularly true if you or a third party are using HL7 SPL process for data submission to GUDID. The second step is the actual implementation. Whether the outcome of your implementation is successful is directly tied to how well your team plans. Validation of the changes becomes a significant aspect of the implementation process and cannot be taken lightly. Remember the old adage, garbage in, garbage out. But in this case, there are serious ramifications for garbage in. Finally, the process never ends. The entire system will need continual maintenance. One important step is to add UDI into your product development process. I stated earlier that assigning a new UDI doesn't impact existing pre-market submissions, but pre-market submissions in the future will be requiring UDIs be assigned as part of the submission process. Post-market surveillance activities also feed into the post-implementation process as device changes are made as a result of tracking and reporting activities. And you will find that you will continually need to train your staff on UDI implementation, especially as there is turnover. What I want to stress here is from my experience with implementing GS1 GTINs, it is truly a total organizational effort. From product development to marketing to manufacturing to regulatory affairs and many other departments. It also requires the active support of top management. Such a significant undertaking needs to be started as soon as possible. UDI implementation requires departments working together to meet regulatory requirements, not only initially, but also on an ongoing basis. For instance, marketing needs to decide if it will use the DI in device collateral or stay with what they have been using, or use both. You need to work with your customers and suppliers to make sure, if needed, to determine their ability to use UDIs in their process, not only to help trace product, but to also support your UDI program. Is the UDI rule only a new regulation to make life difficult and costly? I don't believe so. It's also good business. Many of your customers are embracing the use of unique identifiers, whether it is through GS1, HIBCC, or ICC BBA. If you sell to hospitals or other providers directly or through GPOs, then it is good business to embrace this rule and implement the changes required to meet the needs of your current and future customers. Our customers were telling us to implement GTINs, or they would find other suppliers. Maybe you can ignore one or two customers, but when the number became significant, you need to act. Losing major customers was not something we could afford. Can you? And as I said earlier, it really is time to publish or perish. Thank you for listening to this webinar on the FDA UDI final rule.
Thank you, John. That was an excellent overview.
Thank you.
I really didn't realize the implementation.
That's a tough word to keep saying over and over
I
again.
know it is. You were trying stumbling what to do, but I didn't realize this last slide right here.
Yeah.
That says it all.
Yep.
To me. I mean, that is powerful. And if you can go to the next slide, if anybody has any questions, John is kind enough to answer questions later. Here's all his contact information, and you will also get the PowerPoint presentation with this recording. But wow, this is the first time I've seen a overview of this, and that was a powerful presentation, John. I just wanted to thank you for your time today. And again, if anybody has any questions, there's his information, and he's kind enough to answer questions. So, John, thank you
You're welcome.
for this excellent presentation today, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
I'm ending the webinar now.